Martin, you watched it. Simon, you no doubt watched it, covered in birthday cake, and I watched it. Martin, before we go anywhere, what was your take in it regards the final itself and Chelsea emerging as winners?
I thought Chelsea played brilliantly in the game. I heard Maresca speaking afterwards saying that they won it in the first 10 minutes, and that's probably very true. I was surprised, I must admit, because it was very hot, and but the closing down early on in proceedings and actually being able to keep it up for larger amounts of time than I would have expected. But overall, it was a brilliant effort by them. Considering PSG, European champions, having beaten Real Madrid as well too comprehensively. Yeah, all in all, it was a result I probably didn't really expect.
When I left you here, we were a bit shell-shocked after our time with John Textor. We'll get to that, and Matters Crystal Palace. That was on Thursday, Simon. Were you saying to me you expected PSG to run out winners?
Oh, yeah.
I certainly did.
Yeah, I thought that on the balance of probability, I mean, a game is an individual game. It can take its own shape. I mean, I like Maresca talking about the fact that when we told his players that they wanted to make sure that PSG knew that Chelsea were here to win. And then he went on to say what Martin said, which is that the first 10 minutes determine the outcome of the game. It's a great result for them. However you patch it up, or however you've won the European Conference League, whatever we think of that. You've now won the FIFA World Club Championships, and if you're in a tournament, you might as well win it. And you've taken the biggest scalp in European football, and the PSG were there to win, and you've outplayed them.
Sure.
And I'll tell you, some of those signings, I like the boy they bought from Brighton. I really like him. I think and I think Delap's going to give them options. Yeah. I think they're going to be a little bit of a force next year. I don't think they're going to be a force to win the league, but I think they're going to rattle a few cages.
Well, we're going to put it out there, Martin, because Chelsea fans this morning, I heard some of you on with Jeff and Andy, Martin and Neil's with Simon and myself. This is your big moment. Come on and tell us what you really think. I mean, has this one result shifted the view on Chelsea as potential title challengers next season? And where are you at with Maresca? Give us a call this morning, 03717 223344. You can message me if you want, 81089. Martin mentioned Enzo Maresca and what it meant to Chelsea. This was Maresca post-match.
Club World Cup champion is something that we have to be proud. We are very happy, especially against PSG, that, as I said 2 days ago in the press conference, I consider them the best team in the world, with one of the best managers in the world, fantastic player. So today has been top achievement.
I mean, Simon, I'll put it to you. Has the outcome of this, shifted your view or anybody else's view on Chelsea as potential title challengers next season? Do you think they're capable of winning the league?
Well, look, I mean, I said 2-3 years ago, didn't I? 2 years ago that Chelsea will win the league within the next 3 years, and it was universally laughed at. And I'm one of the few people that have sat in the media saying, don't you worry about this. People make mistakes, but these guys with this kind of money, they'll get it right in the end. Now, that's a cup competition where you've played in certain conditions. Some of the opposition you've played against hasn't been that compelling. It's very different from a 38-game season in the Premier League, where most of the opposition, with a few exceptions like the promoted sides recently, are compelling opposition. I think Chelsea will be a good side next year. I think it's difficult to see them winning the league based upon what they're up against, but we don't know how these sides are going to react. The rebuild of Manchester City, we thought they were rebuilding. They get knocked out by the Saudis in a competition. It's a competition that they'll take lessons from and move forward on. Yeah. And you look at Liverpool and you wonder, for the tragedy of what's happened at Liverpool, whether that will have an adverse effect, whether it will galvanise. So I don't see Chelsea win the league next year. I'd like them to win the league next year because I'd like to be right in what I said when I was universally ridiculed, but I'm not sure that they will.
Martin, do you think the name's on it next season?
Not necessarily. I mean, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't even say that Liverpool are guaranteed to win it either. You just don't know. But what they do have is they've got more options now. Pedro's just arrived at the football club. It's got a glorious start for him, and Delap as well too gives them another option. And those type of attacking options, which I don't think that they had last season. Jackson, there were certain periods of time where he looked absolutely terrific, and other times where you weren't particularly sure. So there's definitely proper competition for places again. I think they are actually a very fine side, as they proved. But that's a difficult one to call over a 38-game season. But they definitely have more options now than ever before.
Interesting to see how Maresca pitches himself, because Maresca had this sort of playing hide-and-seek moment with himself at the end of the season, where he spent the entirety of the Christmas period telling everybody that they weren't ready to win the league. And then when they didn't win the league and they qualified for the Champions League, he spent the entirety of those interviews telling everyone, blaming the media for writing them off, which made no sense to me. But it's interesting to see how he plays it at the beginning of the season, because he's had a remarkable embarrassment of riches. I mean, look at the players that they're bringing in, Martin.
Yeah.
You'd bite your arm off for some of those players in terms of the quality they're able to buy. Yeah. So they should be really competing, shouldn't they?
Without a question. They're definitely. The last few months of the season and continuing into the this World Club Championship has been fantastic. They go and win the Conference League. Simon and I have the same view in that particular league. But even so, it is still a competition. You go and win it. Then you qualify in the last days of the season for the Champions League. Very, very important. Then you continue that. They're taking this. They get a 3-week break now. They're back. And they're ready to go. Confidence will be absolutely sky high.
Simon is saying Maresca has had a great deal of funds behind him to go and get whoever he would think fits the bill over the door and in at Stamford Bridge. But they've spent the same kind of money as Manchester United have spent.
Well, thereby hangs a tail, really. I think that Maresca...
It's what you do with it.
It's what you do with it. Now, I think the point that Simon's making is that Maresca's kind of hidden himself away, said something at one particular juncture, and then a couple of months later said something else. It reminds me of me, I think. But overall, I think it is one now where he has to stand up and say, yeah, we are a proper side now. We have got the tools to go and compete over a 38-game season because we have the wherewithal to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's right. I'm not trying to be clever with you, but I'm not sure they have spent as much as Man United spent as much as them, because the whole media focus has been on this outlandish expenditure since Todd Bowley's walked through the door. I mean, we're making arguments recently about the one everyone seemed to be awfully concerned for poor old Chelsea spending. The only people who didn't seem to be concerned about it were Chelsea.
The net spends are
the net
comparable.
Spend. Sure. But forget the net spend. You need to look at the gross spend, because net spend is including trading. You've still spent top-line figures of £1.5 billion on players in the 2 or 3 years that Bowley's been there, best part of. Yeah. That's remarkable expenditure.
It is.
Yeah.
Remarkable expenditure.
Matt, before we hit the break, and we need to talk about this, Luis Enrique has made a great deal of, has won over a great deal of people over there in the US. Extremely likeable, highly rated, and yet at the end, and it's almost seemingly swept under the carpet this morning, he might find himself in a spot of trouble for his role in the post-match fracas. Did you stay with it as long as I did last night? I mean, I watched it right to the very end.
Did you?
When tempers frayed in the closing stages. João Neves had been sent off for pulling the hair of Marc Cucurella, and then scuffles broke out on the pitch. And it seemed that Luis Enrique moved forward and pushed João Pedro in the face, who went down like a sack of potatoes, which is always quite pathetic. Cucurella was guilty of that himself. I mean, it's almost embarrassing when you see players behave like that. Nonetheless, there was a hands-on moment. Luis Enrique could be in a spot of trouble, couldn't he?
Well, I did see the highlights kind of late on. I didn't see it as it was actually happening. Not that it was actually going to change. The pictures are not going to change. But I think it's a bit of overacting. But Luis Enrique has actually pushed someone. Listen, it's a nothing incident, but at the same time, it's something that a manager probably shouldn't be doing, despite the fact that he's probably lost his cool.
Yeah, and of course they just lost a match that they were expected to win.
That they would be expected to win, although that doesn't necessarily mean that you should be pushing people around about. But he's obviously get irritated by Pedro.
Yeah. Are the Chelsea fans out there who this morning are going to come on and say the title's ours next season as a result of this? Where are you at? Phil, good morning, big Chelsea fan. You're first up. What would you like to say?
Yeah, good morning. Yes, I do believe we are title contenders. I don't think our name's on the title, but we are definitely going to be contenders this year or next season. We've made some fantastic signings. I think Maresca's made some... His tactics are actually working at last. You've got João Pedro, fantastic signing.
Yeah.
Neto still playing well. I wasn't too sure about him, but no, I'm a big fan now. We've still got to sort out our defence. I do think that, and I've always been a big fan of Sancho. I think he's a great goalkeeper, and he proved that last night.
Okay. All is well in the Chelsea garden then. You're happy with everything, Phil, going into this season?
Well, except for defence. I still believe we need to sort out a bit of defence.
Okay.
And Reece James, he's still injury prone. I'm a bit worried about him. But at last, we've got some forwards.
What do you think, Martin O'Neill's alongside me, Phil? What about Sanchez, Robert Sanchez, the goalkeeper? Would you be as happy as Phil is? Because some Chelsea fans have been saying the goalkeeping department is one they need to look at.
Well, some of the Chelsea fans would know that over a whole season, and it would be in a better position than me to make that judgment. But going on last night, he was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
and made some really great saves. And if that's anything to go by, well, you'd have to have somebody better than to put in place.
What about Nick, who's a big Chelsea fan? Nick, you've seen them win it, and now with anticipation you await the arrival of the new season. How optimistic are you that Chelsea may go close or win the Premier League title?
Thanks, Jim. Good morning, guys.
Morning, Nick.
Morning. I think we're getting there. We had that dip during the season, but I think that was partly due to Maresca opening his mouth and saying we're not good enough to win the title. I think when you've got a bunch of kids and you come out with a statement like that, maybe it affected their confidence for a couple of months. Certainly the end of the season was fantastic. Robert Sanchez last night, if he could play like that virtually every game, we don't need another keeper. That was the best performance for me that he's put in. It was a proper team performance, and I think Maresca's still learning in the job. He's definitely getting there. We had moments last season where we were absolutely dreadful to watch, passing sideways, going backwards, but the last couple of months, really good signs. And I'd say I don't think yet we're as good as maybe Liverpool, Man City, but I think we're definitely getting there, and I think we've got a chance of winning the title this season.
Do you think the ownership deserves a pat in the back here, would you say, Nick, for what they've done, bullying Egbali?
Yeah, I do. I mean, because they kept faith. It would have been quite easy. It's nice for a change to have a bit of a long-term strategy that seems to be working. So, well, I think most of us Chelsea fans thought, what you're doing, you're clearing out everybody. And I still think it's a mistake to get rid of some of the senior pros. I think if they'd have hung around a bit longer, maybe we would have got here a bit quicker. But they had a plan. They stuck to it. They, as Simon says, we have spent a lot of money. But as you said, Jim, if you compare us with Manchester United, I think we spent that money wisely. We're about to have a clear out of the club. There's certain players that are going to go, so we're going to have a bit more income. And bottom line is, we've just won another trophy, and we've won an awful lot of money on the back of $125 million estimate. So, yeah, very optimistic about the future.
Nick, thanks for the call. Here's Carl, another Chelsea fan. Carl, what do you want to say?
Yeah, well, you had a phone-in just before the end of the season saying, is Maresca the right man for Chelsea and to take them forward? And a lot of Chelsea fans were phoning in and saying, no, he wasn't. But I backed him, and I said, you've got to give the guy a chance. You know, he's turned that team of young players around, got them to finish fourth, got them to the conference, and won it.
Yeah. Why did you back him, Carl? Why did you back him?
Purely for that, you know, the fact that he a team of unexperienced players as such, because they were so young, and he seemed to be, I could just see he seemed to be doing something, you know, and to get there and to finish fourth, and to get us back into the Champions League and to win that final. Look, listen, we're not the best team in the world. We're not the best team in Europe. We're not even the best team in the Premier League. But we're now a team where people need to look and go, hang on a minute, I think there could be something seriously happening here.
Just before you go, Carl, I'm seeing fans of other clubs getting in touch. There's one message. Why are you concentrating on all of this? Nobody cares about the friendly cup that FIFA created. Just threw in a bunch of cash. Nobody really cares. Nobody attended it. Nobody watched it. What would you say to that, Carl?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably said by the teams that ain't in it.
Yeah.
You know, and not there to win it. And, you know, at the end of the day, it comes with a lot of money.
Exactly. Dylan, you'd agree, would you, that this thing was worth winning and that Chelsea rightly are crowned Club World Cup winners? Good morning, Dylan.
Well, I'd like to start off saying good morning, Jim. Good morning, Martin. Is Simon in? If Simon's in, good morning, mate. I hope you're all doing well this morning. I am absolutely buzzing. I can't lie. I know people write this tournament off, but for me, I watched the whole tournament. I stayed up till 3 a.m. to watch the rubbish games. I watched last night. we were awesome, boys. Like, I've never seen a team beat PSG the way we did. We did what PSG do to other teams to PSG. I thought from the goalie to the boys up top to the lads who come off the bench to the management, we were excellent last night. What do you think? How do you think we played?
Well, you did play excellently and you won the thing. Do you think you win the Premier League title?
Genuinely, hands down, believe it's between us and Liverpool. I think City, I don't think City are there, mate. Top two. I think they've had a lot of new signings January and summer. I think they'll take a little bit of time to click the way they normally do. They may not click the way they used to. Who knows? De Bruyne's left. I think it's Arsenal ball jobs usually. I think they'll drop off even if they sign Gyökeres. And personally, I think Liverpool have made an amazing few signings. I really do rate their transfer window. So
Dylan, listen, thank you, mate, for all the good points you've made. Martin, they're right to be upbeat. They're right to be upbeat at this particular time, Chelsea fans.
Of course, I've just mentioned there a couple of moments ago that the last 4 or 5 months have been fantastic for them. Really fantastic. They won the Conference League, they could get into the Champions League, and they go during the summertime. And whatever you think of this competition, it's financially it's been worth winning. It's £100 million to them.
How much of that can they throw at players, Simon? I mean, they're in good nick. When
they've got no issues with PSR, they spend money as they see fit, don't they? They sell their women's team, they sell their hotels, they structure themselves in a way that gives them the opportunity. Don't forget, they've just got a £30 million fine from UEFA as well. So that's out of this competition, they've got 84 million. So they're down to net 54, aren't they? After they've paid their fines for financial breaches that UEFA have just sanctioned them under. Yeah. But look, we're talking about this conversation with Chelsea as if it's a revelation to me. I've sat here for the last 2 years saying that Chelsea will be successful. They will be a successful side. Now, whether Maresca's going to lead them to the Holy Grail and to the Promised Land, I don't know. We'll see. He's had a good season. He's been given the tools. They came off the back of a decent... Don't forget, this time last year, people had confected outrage about how outrageous it was to get rid of Pochettino, because Pochettino had a good second half of the season and Chelsea were finding their feet. So he came into an environment where they'd found their feet a little bit, and he was given... And some of his signings haven't worked out. The boy from Leicester hasn't worked out. Some of the signings that he's made haven't worked out as well as they could have done. But right now, when you're in a position... Martin O'Neill will tell you as a manager, if he was in a situation where you've got the kind of support from your owners that get very little credit, by the way, besides ridicule, because most of the narrative has been about Chelsea. They've got a clown American ownership that doesn't know what it's doing. Now, all of a sudden, round it goes on its head. The fact is, if you've got an owner that's prepared to give you 1.5 billion euros over 3 seasons, you've got half a chance, Martin, right?
You certainly do. Yeah, absolutely. But that's not again in defence of Maresca. I think that he actually has done very, very well, because he stepped in.
He was bold as well at the beginning of the season.
Absolutely. He was bold. He had things to sort out as well at the football club. Absolutely. Yeah. And you still have to find a pattern of play. You have to try and involve players that you don't really know. A lot of them you don't really know, and you're getting it together. So it's been again. I agree with Simon in the sense I don't think you could have ever felt that Chelsea were going to end up finding themselves in a mid-table to dropping down towards relegation position. They've now got the tools to go and be very, very competitive.
Of course, we have to look at the situation which is developing all the time regarding Crystal Palace. Article 5, FA Cup winners, Crystal Palace. Article 5 of UEFA's regulations for the Europa League deals with multi-club ownership. Amongst the rules, it quotes, no one may simultaneously be involved either directly or indirectly in any capacity whatsoever in the management, administration and or sporting performance of more than one club participating in a UEFA club competition. UEFA's rules set a deadline of March the 1st, 2025 to show proof of multi-club ownership restructuring, a deadline which Crystal Palace missed. Now, if you missed it, and I don't think there's anybody in this country that missed the interview last week when John Textor was in this very studio. John Textor, of course, had a considerable involvement with Crystal Palace until recently. But the same John Textor spoke, the man at the centre of all of this, spoke to Simon and myself and said live on talkSPORT, it dawned on him when the FA Cup was won at Wembley by Crystal Palace, the players came up to collect the trophy and he thought, now this could get interesting. This was Textor. But more recently, when the Crystal Palace captain lifted the FA Cup above his head and you're applauding, was a part of you thought, oh God.
is what I thought. Am I allowed to say that?
Who said it?
God. Yeah, no, I didn't. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was so happy, but I felt the gravity to it, and I was concerned, of course.
On the same day?
Holding the cup next to the Prince. Yeah, it was a great, great moment. And I couldn't have been happier. I couldn't have been happier for the fans. You know, but yeah, I was worried about what was coming. I'll admit to not even thinking about the issue. Of course, I have to. But I also read the rule. So please read the rule yourself. Like, everybody's talking about it like it's so obvious. The rule's very clear. If you have decisive influence, you may need to consider this. I don't. I didn't. If I had decisive influence, I wouldn't have been trying to sell the club starting in June of 2024.
So later on Friday, the news came through that yes, indeed, it was the news that Crystal Palace fans and people like Texter and the chairman Steve Parish were dreading, that they were dropping out of the Europa League, and it was Europa Conference League football for them next season. Now, we'll get to Simon and Martin in a second, but over in the US, Steve Parish then gave his reaction to that news to Sky Sports.
Well, obviously, we're devastated. You know, we're devastated for, most importantly, the supporters. And I think something the supporters of all clubs should be devastated for us, because this is the dream. You know, you win a cup, actually win something for the first time in your history. And as somebody said to me, it's like winning the lottery and going to the counter and you don't get the prize. So I'm devastated for the players, for the fans, for the staff. And I think it's a bad day for football. I think most football fans, right-minded football fans, will see what an injustice, terrible injustice this is for the football club, and one that I ideally hope somebody can remedy, because I do believe that nobody in football wants to see this. Nobody in football, and I don't think UEFA want to see this, clubs that rightfully qualify for a competition being locked out of that competition on the most ridiculous technicality that you could imagine.
Devastated, and it's a ridiculous technicality. In the Daily Mail on Saturday, Simon, Ian Lademan, well-respected journalist, Crystal Palace's tumble from the Europa League before it has even started is a sporting catastrophe they should have seen coming. That they didn't is overwhelmingly on them. This, in essence, is the London club's own fault. Is that how you see it?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, I assumed that they would have a credible position to advance to the UEFA panel that was going to adjudicate over the circumstances they found themselves in, which is why I pushed back originally and said this will find its level and Palace will find their way through it.
Well, it started, but you thought it was a non-story.
No, I never thought it was a non-story. What I thought
you did.
No, I didn't think it was a non-story.
You thought it would go nowhere.
No, I didn't think it was a non-story. What I thought the outcome would be that Palace would find their way through it, which is based upon the fact that I assumed that they would be credibly imbued with the right positioning. Now, if you've taken somebody into your business and bought and sold them shares, and you've got a rule that exists since 2010, which was reinforced and the parameters established very clearly in 2017 over the RB situation, I would have assumed that Parish and his cohorts would have been across the position clearly and understood their obligations. And to suggest that they don't, and whether people think it's because I've got an agenda against Parish, got nothing to do with that. You know, the situation is that ironically, this is now a victimless crime. Because Palace, the shareholder in question, has sold his shares. The teams that, whether if they play in a competition, will not have the challenges they've got there. But when you listen to Parish's interview, I mean, one of the questions that was asked of him by the Sky guy was, you know, about decisive influence. The answer is categorically, unequivocally, no. Not, oh, I have influence from my 8-year-old son or influence from fans. If somebody asks you a question, does somebody have decisive influence or influence, and you answer it, well, an 8-year-old has influence on me. It's a ridiculous answer. And then to suggest that you don't have the information because it goes into info at well, that's where all the Premier League communication goes. That's where the information goes full stop. And then to talk about you're not a multi-club ownership, to keep on reinforcing that point. Well, the panel haven't accepted that. You haven't given them a credible enough position to accept it. So you can stop. You've got to stop trotting that out. And you now got to look at the reality of what your options are. It is clearly, undeniably, you know, whether people think there's an agenda behind this, the executive control of this football club has been well documented as being Steve Parish. He's the executive chairman. This is his responsibility. This rule has been in existence since 2010. It's been reinforced in 2017. It was reminded to all the Premier League clubs by the Premier League themselves, not just UEFA, as Palace was saying. UEFA, we don't have any communication with UEFA, we never have done. It came from the Premier League in October 2024. It was provided for in their accounts by their finance director which were filed at the end of the year on the 31st of December, suggesting that they needed to be mindful of the changes of UEFA regulations. They have had dealings with Lyon. They have had dealings with the Belgium club that Textor owns. So the reality of it is, this is completely, whether you like it or not, it is completely Palace's own fault. They should have done their due diligence in terms of, if we're going to take Textor's money, right? He's got other clubs. He's gone and bought Lyon. Right, he's got 43%. Right, what do we need to do? Have we got council's advice in place to make sure that these rules that we know exist, by taking his money, putting it in our pockets as shareholders, and bankrolling the club through COVID, have we made ourselves a hostage to fortune? Which they have. Now you go to the rule and say the fairness of this rule. It's a ridiculous rule. When Palace go into the Europa League next year, if they were playing in it, they'd be playing against Lyon. Textor wouldn't be a shareholder in Palace. So who is now going to be compromised? You're taking the present, and you're overlaying the past onto it.
So where's the ambivalence here? So where are you standing? And you're saying that this could be actually overthrown and that Crystal Palace could get in. Is that because first of all, UEFA insisting because they missed the deadline, or is that because now at this minute, as we stand, Textor is no longer a part owner of Crystal Palace?
It's a bad deadline, isn't it? Because the only time you should really be conflicted is when when the competition is actually played. And if you've got influence in two camps at the time the competition is played, then ultimately the rule should be effective. Now they've changed the accountancy deadline from June the 1st to March the 31st. Deadline schmedline. Palace's shareholders don't exist in the same way, and the decisive influence, decisive control. I understand why the rules are there, and the ridiculousness of multi-club ownership is you either want it or you don't. They'll say we want it because if you've got it on different continents, it doesn't affect you. If you've got it in South America and in Europe, you're not going to play in competitive football very often.
Yeah. But when you set out, first of all, when you set as owners of Crystal Palace, you're putting money in there, hoping at some stage or another that you actually might make this club successful. So you know the rule that there's a possibility if you have a joint.
But they're saying
ownership.
Their defence is two things. We didn't know the rule.
They didn't know the rule?
They didn't know the rule. Or more likely, they're suggesting they didn't know the rule deadline had changed till March the 1st. It's not true.
Yeah.
It's not true, they did.
Yeah.
Now, and it seems they didn't know of loopholes.
Well, the loopholes have always been there, which is putting things into blind trust. Textor himself, now, whether John contradicts himself a lot of the time in that interview with due respect to him, he talked about the fact that he didn't know the rule. And then said, as soon as we lifted the cup, oh, damn. He said something different, right? So obviously he knew there was a concern there. So obviously there was a concern going on. As much as people might want to think this is an agenda being served out, this is on the executive control of Crystal Palace. And if the executive control of Crystal Palace is the executive chairman, which Paris tells everybody that he is, then it's on him. They took 130 million quid, give or take, from Textor to sell their shares. At that time, and with 2021, they should have been fully conversant with rules. Now, it's not just the FA Cup, by the way. Palace could get into Europe through the League Cup. It's not beyond the wit of man to suggest a Premier League club that's been in the Premier League for 13 years can win the League Cup. So they should have had this prepared.
Right. And now as Ian Ladyman says in the Mail, Simon, Palace didn't do anything about it. They sat in their hands. They took a risk. Crystal Palace were looking forward to a big season in the Europa League, having won the FA Cup at Wembley, of course, over Manchester City. They were entitled to look forward to a big season in the Europa League, but now they've tumbled out of that and they're in the Europa Conference, whether they like it or not, and it's all because they missed a deadline. And Steve Parish, the Crystal Palace chairman, blasted, quote, one of the greatest injustices in the history of football after the FA Cup winners were relegated to next season's Conference League. Before I take a couple of calls, Simon, many Palace fans are coming on to me saying, is there still a chance we'll play in the Europa League? Is there a glimmer of hope?
Well, it depends what case they present and how skillful an advocate they've got for the Court of Arbitration of Sport. Whilst if anyone vilifies Parish, they've also got to remember that he's presided over the most successful period in this football club's history. I wanted it, Ron Nodes wanted it, other people wanted it. He's put the club in the Premier League, he's kept them there, he's brought an investment into his football club, and they've seen better things at that football club than any of us were able to put together.
I agree, but this doesn't appear to be his finest hour, does it?
So he's made a mistake. So you point me to somebody that doesn't make a mistake. He's made a mistake. And the reality, the questions that need to be asked is, why have they made a mistake? Why did they take the investment? Why didn't they structure it properly? Why didn't they think about it? Those are the questions. But if we're going to lambast the fella for making one mistake, when ultimately the 15 years that he's been there, irrespective of my views on him, predominantly has been pretty successful, I think is a pretty mean-spirited way to look at it.
Yeah, but it is a very public calamity, if you like. It is an embarrassment nonetheless that they've gone from that competition to the one that everybody says is a run, to quote you, the runt of the litter.
It's a disappointment. And the flip side of it is, the irony of it is that I actually think they'll be better off in the European Conference League, because it might give them 2 opportunities to be in Europe, because they might win that competition and have a second season. But for the purpose of this conversation, they should be in the Europa League.
Paul is a big Crystal Palace fan. Paul, where are you at this particular stage in the proceedings with all of this? Good morning.
Good morning, lads. You all right?
Good, thanks, Paul. What do you think?
Good. I have to say, I do agree with Simon about Steve Parish and what he's done, but there's a lot of proof I can sort of say how this is the club's fault. Ollie Glasner, before the third round of the FA Cup, came out and said we're in this to win it. We then go and play Doncaster and we have a full-strength side out. We play Millwall and we play pretty much a full-strength side out. Now, if we're going to go and attempt to win this competition, we have to then recognise that there are UEFA laws. We have broken UEFA laws. We have got the punishment we deserve. Now, we can keep going on about injustice and everything else. Where's the injustice if we've broken the laws of the governing body? There isn't. And then we literally have done this to ourselves. Now, with the Conference League, I agree with Simon. We're going to be better off in there, because the one thing that we have to remember is Selhurst is still going to be rocking on a Thursday night or a Thursday afternoon. We're in Europe. We've won the FA Cup, which is more than most people do. But it's foresight, yet again, from our board. And there's one last thing I just want to say. John Texer said something damning towards Steve Parish, which was, if you go back to the interviews, he said that Steve Parish only looks at the beginning of every season not to get relegated. 13 years in the Premier League, and we are still attempting not to get relegated in our chairman's eyes. How is that correct?
Many interesting points there, Paul. Briefly, in the passage, how do you want to answer, Paul?
Well, I would say
some good points. He's thought about what he's saying.
I mean, it's difficult for me to want to defend him, but in this instance, I would say to you that I sat with Paul Barber last summer, who tells me that Brighton's motivation every single season is to start the season not being relegated. So whether you like that description or not, it is a description that a lot of the football clubs look at from the outset.
Totally pragmatic view from Paul, though. Sorry, Martin, you were going to come in.
No, he's talking about that's what they set out to do, and there's nothing wrong with that, because there's no such thing. Even if you've been 10 consecutive years in the Premier League, there's a club like Crystal Palace. There's no absolute guarantee that you'll make it the following year. There's no such thing as just you have settled down to being a Premier League club. There's about 5 or 6 clubs that can say that without doubt. The rest are in the
Paul,
battle.
Thanks for your many points there. John's another Palace fan. John, good morning. What do you want to say about this?
Yes, I want to say John Texter says that when Palace lifted the cup, he was worried that there was a problem. Well, at that stage, there wasn't a problem, because Strasbourg were in the key position to get into the Europa League. Somehow they lost against a bottom club in the French league who were struggling against relegation. And that match didn't end until somewhere around about 11 o'clock at night. So he couldn't have known at that stage that there was a problem. Lyon were very, very lucky. They got in on goal difference. And I just think there's something not quite right. I did actually read in that the Telegraph sort of put an article in there recommending Todd Bowley put his Strasbourg shares into a trust, but this was in April because he hadn't even done it. So if all the other big teams are not doing it, why should Palace? I mean, even Marinakis at Nottingham Forest going around saying, "Oh, I put my shares in." Well, apparently he didn't. He contacted UEFA and asked them for some time to get himself into order. So all these big clubs are getting away with it, but not Palace, and that's all I want to say.
Well, I mean, John, what we do know is, regards Lyon and Palace, in the situation that arose, the club ranked highest in their domestic competition is allowed to participate in the relevant UEFA competition. Therefore, Lyon remain in the Europa League thanks to their 6th place finish in Ligue 1 after Palace finished 12th. That's my gist of it. That's the understanding we have of it.
I mean, when all this changed over, it was understood that the winners of the English FA Cup and the FA Cup round, they would get places in the European League. There was no European Cup Winners' Cup now. Where do we stand? Is our cup competition so minor in the eyes of UEFA? The cup that's been going on for over 160 years, and it's all rather ridiculous.
All right, listen, John, one more call coming in from David. Thanks for the points you've made. David, take me to the break. What do you want to say on this? You still hopeful you might end up playing in the Europa League, or have you given up on that?
Hi guys. Really good show. I really enjoy listening to you. I'm a massive Palace fan, and I've been following Palace for years. And my eldest son's a massive Palace fan, so is my younger son, season ticket holders. We've seen a lot of turmoil at the club. Steve Parish, in fairness to him, has brought stability to the club. Some fantastic moments as a Palace fan under Steve Parish. But ultimately, I own some businesses. Once a month, you have a meeting with all the main people go to that meeting. That must have been raised in that meeting, or one of the meetings. There's going to be an issue here, lads. Palace. This is the thing. I don't want to be a Palace fan that's seen as moaning. Okay, there's a lot of Palace fans on social media moaning about this. At the end of the day, we broke the rules. Okay, as much as I hate the sun, I'd love to see on a Thursday night Palace in a fantastic European game. Okay, but ultimately that club, we knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
They didn't plan for it, okay? And all this stuff, Steve Parish does not hold his hand up at all and says, we mucked up here, we're going to try and get out of it, but we mucked up. It's all about, we're playing the victim card. And I don't, as a Palace fan, I find that...
And you don't want that to be played, David.
Who do you blame? Because a lot of... John was in the studio on Thursday, and he's been villainised, because I don't think it's Texter's fault. Who do you, as a Palace fan, blame? Because I look at it and say it's Parish. People might think that's my motivation towards Parish, but it is Parish because he's the executive chairman. Who do you blame for it?
Simon, look, you own the club, right? You own the club. And when you owned it, you were responsible from everything, from the tea lady right up to the manager and the high people, Harry Janney. You're responsible for all them people. Yeah. It's your stewardship, okay? You're ultimately responsible. There's no point in blaming anyone else other than the person sitting there at the top of the tree, okay? The CEO, the chairman's ultimately responsible for everything that goes on in that club, okay? That is my opinion on it. Texter, okay? Personally, he put a lot of money into the club. If it had come along to you, Simon, when you was on your, trying to get money off the banks and they weren't giving you any money and said, I'll give you some money, Simon, so you can keep carrying on, what would you say to him?
I would have taken it, but if I also knew that I was in the Premier League and there was going to be likely contract, I would have found a mechanism during the 7 or 8 years, or certainly 4 years that John Texter was there to find a solution. The only difficulty for Texter is holding those shares in a business, whereas Ratcliffe and other people don't hold their shares in business, they hold it in their private name. So it's not just as easy as putting
that's where we're at, David.
Trust.
And thanks for your call. It's understood that any appeal to CAS would be fast-tracked to take place before the draw for the Conference League playoff round on the 4th of August, with Palace due to play the first leg 3 weeks later. It is that time, isn't it? Alex Crook is right across it. Many fans getting in touch with me this morning saying, who do you think Chelsea will sign now that they are club or World Cup champions? Are Arsenal any closer to getting in the lad from Sporting Lisbon? Well, let's get right into it now. Alongside Martin O'Neill, Simon and myself, Alex Crook, chief football correspondent here at talkSPORT, joins us live. Alex, good morning. Let's start with Arsenal. Why not? What's going on?
Yeah, good morning. It's certainly been a busy transfer window for Arsenal so far, and I think a busy week ahead as well. We were reporting yesterday that a fee verbally agreed with Sporting for Victor Gyökeres. There has been suggestions in the Portuguese media in recent days that deal was in danger of collapse. It certainly was stalling. I never really bought into that. It struck me as brinkmanship. He's made it pretty clear for several weeks now. We first reported it on talkSPORT in mid-June that he wanted to join Arsenal. Looks like he will get his wish, £63.5 million, the deal. A 5-year contract agreed. And key to it, and very keen to get Simon's view on this with his disliking of most football agents, Gyökeres' agent waiving a pretty hefty slice of the fee in order to get this deal over the line.
Well done to the agent.
Simon, these agents.
There you go. What a good gesture from the agent there. And well reported, Alex. Simon, what's your take on that?
I would suspect that was a stumbling block all along, wouldn't you? I mean, there's obviously some clause in there that the agent gets a big part of the transfer fee and they don't like it. So maybe the player should just pay his agent. Here's a rarity, hey? Maybe get the player to pay the agent that works for you rather than the club paying it.
Actually, are you in Simon's camp on that one, Martin? That the players are the ones who should be paying the agents, not the clubs.
I've never known why it should be anything else other than that. I really don't. I'm sure that an actor will end up paying his agent for something that he's been given.
Yeah.
God, I've never understood this. Why a club should end up having to pay for a player or pay the agent.
So Alex, what kind of time schedule are we looking at for Gyökeres then coming through the front door?
Yeah, I think this one could develop quite quickly now. I know Arsenal have got a pre-season tour in the coming days, and I think ideally they would like their shiny new striker, and this is the first time they've signed an out-and-out number 9 in more than 3 years to be part of that travelling party. So I think it's going to be a busy week as far as Arsenal are concerned. We know that Noni Madueke left the Club World Cup early, missed out on a winner's medal in the final to undergo his medical. That'll be a £52 million transfer. I do wonder if the Arsenal protests might get a bit quieter now amongst their fans that Gyökeres is agreed. And they're also signing Mosquera, a defender from Valencia, fee agreed for around about £18 million there. Obviously, with incomings will come outgoings, the likes of Reece Nelson, Fabio Vieira, Alexander Zinchenko and maybe Jakub Kiwior as well, all open to offers as far as Arsenal are concerned. But they're getting players in the door, and this is the one position that Arsenal fans really were crying out for. They have been for some time. They believe he can be a difference maker.
Yeah, we're going to talk separately about the situation that's developed, it would seem, reportedly, between Tottenham and Nottingham Forest regarding Morgan Gibbs-White. It's getting a bit messy, a bit nasty, that one. We'll get to that. Manchester United, goalkeeper crisis. Where are we at with this?
Yeah, Andre Onana has picked up a calf injury. He's going to be out for up to 6 weeks, so he's going to miss the bulk of pre-season and the start of the new Premier League season. This is a headache for Manchester United, one that Ruben Amorim would suggest could do without. I think ideally they would sell Onana and bring in a new number 1 with the likes of Emi Martinez, Diego Costa over in Portugal on their wanted list. No one's going to buy Onana now. On the back of a 6-week layoff. I'm not sure they were queuing up at the door anyway. So Manchester United have a decision to make. I don't think they have the funds now to bring in a number 1. I think what they'll look to do is bring in a new number 2 to start the Premier League season and compete with Onana when he is back to full fitness. The likes of Carl Rushworth at Brighton, I know is very highly regarded by a lot of Premier League clubs. Brighton trying to tie him to a new deal before letting him go out on loan. Sam Johnson, I think at Wolverhampton Wanderers, is available and would fit into that category as well. But it's a difficult situation that Manchester United have found themselves in. It's been a difficult summer for Ruben Amorim. It started so well with that £62.5 million deal for Matheus Cunha, quickly over the line. They're still in talks with Brentford about Bryan Mbeumo. I still think that will happen, but I think Manchester United fans are growing a little bit impatient.
Okay, understood. Did you mention Alejandro Garnacho there? I was slightly distracted.
No, I didn't.
No,
but again,
what's going on with him and Saudi?
Well, that is another headache for Ruben Amorim because you've got this infamous 5, if you like, all training away from the first team. Marcus Rashford turned up for training at Carrington on his own last week, 10 minutes after Ruben Amorim had left the building. Rashford came in the back exit. Amorim came out the front entrance. That is probably sort of emblematic of their relationship at this moment in time. He wants Barcelona. I think if he goes there, it'll be a loan deal, no more than that. In terms of Garnacho, he's had interest from Saudi Arabia. I don't think he's keen at this stage of his career to move to the Saudi Pro League. Ideally, I think he wants Chelsea, but obviously they've signed Jamie Gittins, they've signed João Pedro. They're going to need to shift players to make that happen. I wonder where Martin O'Neill stands on this when you've got 5 players and 2 or 3 of them, I put Sancho in the mix as well, with big reputations, big wages. It's a problem for the manager, isn't it, when you've got these players, still presumably in conversations with their teammates, maybe still a bit of a toxic influence at the training ground?
Yeah. Do you want me to answer that, Alex? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it is. I think initially when a manager steps into a football club, you want to try and get a sort of a togetherness. And even people who have been, let's say, out of favour with the previous manager, I think you try to bring them back into the fold again and see how it goes. But now when you have a situation like, for instance, Sancho, Rashford play, and particularly people who are Garnacho having a Rashford shirt on holiday, and then you have Sancho talking about what was it, freedom when players have left the football club. I have to say to you, as a manager, you think, nah, I'm not having this, and so you'll send them off to train somewhere else, and I don't think it's any bad thing really. I don't, and you're hoping somewhere along the way that some of these players do get moved on. That's otherwise it just remains toxic.
What can you tell us about Newcastle before we hit 11:30, Alex?
Well, obviously they've signed Anthony Elanga. I think the attention now is very much towards a new number 9, not to replace Alexander Isak before Newcastle fans hit the panic button. They very much want to keep him, and I think it's going to be difficult for any club to prize him away this summer. They want big money, and I just don't see where that bid will come from. Ugo Ekitike, very highly rated player over in Frankfurt. I think they're looking for about 90 million euros for that transfer to happen, so it would be a big statement signing for Newcastle United. They've obviously let Callum Wilson go. He turned down a new pay-as-you-play contract. What we know about Alexander Isak, for all his qualities, is that he does pick up injuries along the way, so I think they do want a ready-made replacement.
Alex, thank you very much indeed. Simon, you were saying there, as only you can say, players, should pay their agents. It should be the players that pay them and not the clubs. Mm-hmm. And Martin, quite rightly, was saying, well, actors do exactly the same. The wonderful actor, Stephen Graham, is listening. Morning to you, Stephen. Martin's absolutely right. Why should footy players be any different? The agent works for the player, not the club. And Stephen, of course, who's been in the news with that phenomenal series Adolescence recently. Simon's spot on. He's a top fella, says Stephen Graham. Absolutely no nonsense about this. Of course, agents should be paid by the players.
When you were in charge of Crystal Palace, did you have to pay the agent for a player that you've either bought or
I had a very poor relationship with most of the agents.
Yeah,
really?
I'm
surprised.
That's not a surprise. I'm just asking. Yeah.
No, I didn't. I mean, I had famous fallouts with agents that I wouldn't pay. Timmy Cahill's agent, I wouldn't pay. Just told him to get out of my office and go forth and multiply.
Yeah. That's fair enough. Of course, over the weekend, it became clear that Morgan Gibbs-White of Nottingham Forest looks destined to join Thomas Frank at Nottingham Forest. It appeared that a certain amount of money, said to be around 60 million quid, had been triggered in his contract, and that meant that Morgan Gibbs-White could well be on his way sooner than later to Tottenham from Nottingham Forest. The same Nottingham Forest today is said to be consulting lawyers about possible legal action because they believe they haven't granted Spurs permission to speak with Gibbs-White, and also feel there has been a breach in confidentiality regarding the release clause in the England midfielder's contract. So this might get a bit more messy before it calms down a bit, Simon. What we do know at this stage is, as of right now, Morgan Gibbs-White is training at Nottingham Forest and getting on with life as normal.
Wanting to leave to go to Spurs.
And Nottingham Forest have popped that out on their social media account. What do you detect here? How could there be a breach in confidentiality here which might have pushed Mr. Marinakis to act upon it?
It depends who he's alleging the breach towards. I don't know who the agent is in this mix. I don't know whether the agent has been engaged by Spurs. So if the player's agent has been engaged by Spurs, because the people that will know about this contract are Nottingham Forest, the agent that negotiated the deal in the first place, and the player, right? So why, if Spurs have engaged an agent that's already the player's agent, then their issue is with the player, Nottingham Forest, because his representation has disclosed the release clause. So is it the order of events? Would it be this way, I wonder? Tottenham phone up Nottingham Forest. We want to buy Morgan Gibbs-White. No, we're not interested in selling. End of conversation. Now, there on afterwards, what happens to a release clause? What's the purpose of a release clause if no one knows about it? So a release clause is designed not to be kept a secret by a football club. It's designed to protect that football club's interests.
Right.
And also, in some instances, like Erling Haaland, to manufacture an outcome that best suits the player, because you shouldn't be able to buy Erling Haaland for 55 million quid in today's marketplace, should you? It was created by the agent to facilitate a move and probably some more money for the agent out of it. But the reality of the circumstances is, who are you going to sue and for what? Marinakis throws these things around, wild abandon, You know, whether it's a conspiracy theory against the club because he hired Mark Klassenberg to help him with the refereeing fraternity, which helped nobody, or whether it's with XYZ challenges that he has by going on a football field and feeling the necessity to make a demonstrative gesture towards a player or a manager.
So I'm trying to second guess this. And we've been over the course with this kind of thing before, Martin. I remember getting in touch with somebody at Aston Villa.
But they all do it.
To confirm that the £100 million release clause for Jack Grealish had been activated, had been triggered, and that Grealish would now be out of Aston Villa and heading to Manchester City. And at the time, I was told by people at Aston Villa, no, calm down on that. Don't rush it. It's either triggered or it's not. Well, and in this instance, one would think
it depends on the
£60 million release clause for Morgan and Gibbs-White has been triggered.
Well, hang on. First of all, it depends on the construct of the agreement. Each agreement is unique, so it may not be that it ultimately true. It doesn't give you a God-given right just to do precisely what you want. We understand there's a release clause in the player's contract. We don't understand the caveats of it. We understand there's a release clause, so now we get permission to talk to the player about having a conversation with you. That's not how it works. You still have to have a degree of consultation and agreement with the selling football club.
Surely it's all about you either trigger it or you don't.
Or it depends upon the conditions
with
of
the
it.
magic sum that they want.
Depends upon the conditions of it. It might have a caveat which says that the club can still withhold their permission and not unreasonably withhold it, which is like you get in law, you know, in terms of your consent can't be withheld unreasonably.
I was going to ask you this: is this release clause legally binding document? Is it attached to? It's
part of a contract which is legally binding. So ultimately, is this player's wages legally binding? Yeah, of course they are.
Well,
so the contractual agreement is by the same inference. If you wanted to enforce it through court, you'd enforce it.
Right.
So where Marinakis is going with this is he doesn't like the order of events. And maybe there hasn't been any courtesy, and maybe the agent's been busy, but his guns would appear. Spurs have had form on this. I had Daniel do it to me with Wayne Rowledge. You know, in terms of speaking to my player before I'd even given him permission to do so, making offers for me on transfer deadline day, and then me saying to him, "There's no possible way, Daniel, that you can even get it done today because the player hasn't even had medical." "Oh, don't worry about it. He's around the corner." "Oh, he is he?" "Now he's not going. Definitely, forget it. Now he's definitely not going."
And Daniel's your mate.
Well, you know, all's fair in love and war.
Taking moral high ground in football. Whatever next.
Yeah.
Whatever next. I wonder does the same thing apply to managers as well too? Because I sat in my office just after being bombed out by Marinakis, and 24 minutes later they've announced the new manager. So I wonder in that 24 minutes was the conversation taking place with Lemucci, who might have been in China at the time. I never know. Anyway,
did you detect an alleged breach of confidentiality there, Mark?
That's exactly the point. I'm talking about taking moral high ground in football. It's non-existent. There's no such thing.
But he can't. I mean, first of all, if you go to court on a point of law, you win. If you go to a court on a point of principle, it's very expensive, right? So if he's got the validity in the contract that ultimately it requires Nottingham Forest to give you consent, but to accept the fact that they won't be. First of all, tapping up in football is a universal practiced by everyone.
What did you do it?
They all do it.
You did it.
Well, I spoke to Neil Warnock when he was a manager at Sheffield United.
Yes.
They do it. They all do it. Everyone does it. I can name you most Premier League managers that have been in situations where they've spoken to a player that's registered at another football club and they haven't been given permission to do it.
And did you get a phone call from Sheffield United?
Because quite frankly, why the hell would you want to go to a football club like getting a manager? If I want Martin O'Neill to be my manager and he's managing Nottingham Forest, there's no point me phoning up the football club saying, "Can I have permission to talk to Martin O'Neill?" if he don't want to come to me. I might as well ask him first and go, "Do you want to come here out of interest?" "Yeah, fine." Then I'll ask for permission. So effectively, I've tapped him up because I've asked him first.
Right.
It's a ridiculous rule. If you work for Barclays Bank and Lloyds Bank want you to come and work for you, are you tapped up then? If you go for an interview with Lloyds.
So where's your complaint about Rowledge?
I didn't have a complaint about it. I didn't like the practice of my player's attitude and outlook because I'd looked after him since he was 12 years of age. And I thought a bit more loyalty from him and his family might have been more befitting.
But you'd only done to you what you do to others.
But by the same token, I also wasn't nickel and diming the way Daniel was, putting it up by 50 grand every 10 minutes.
Yeah. Martin, on the Forest front, we know obviously that Elanga has ended up at Newcastle United. If Gibbs-White ends up at Tottenham, what are you thinking about Forest? Because these are two key players.
Well, I can understand Forest's position, believe it or not, because you would want to keep Gibbs-White. Elanga's gone there to Newcastle United, and I thought he was excellent last season. He's probably the quickest player in the league. and Gibbs-White has been powerful since he arrived from Wolverhampton. So it's that to lose those two players, if that's the case, they are going to be very difficult to replace. No question about it. And Forest were terrific last season. I know that dropped off towards the end, but what a season that they've had.
Yeah.
And therefore, as a consequence, to lose those players going into European football doesn't help greatly. Forget about they're dropping into the Conference League, so I'm not too worried about that. But getting back again, getting to the same stride as they did last season is going to be difficult.
Fascinating to see if Forest had been approached by Spurs and said, "Get lost. We're not talking to you about Gibbs-White. None of your business. Go ahead." What Gibbs-White would have done then?
Yeah,
because he'd have had to come in and put a transfer request in.
Yeah. Incidentally, was that a text message from Sheffield United you got there? Just about you tapping up Neil Warnock.